Hi, my name is Fritzi Horstman, and welcome to Compassion in Action. Today, my guest is Dr. Bessel van der Kolk. Bessel van der Kolk is probably one of my biggest trauma heroes. I'm going to cry just thinking about it. I read his book in 2018, and not only did it change the way I felt about myself, it also changed my life, and it set me on this path to creating healing and awareness about childhood trauma experiences in prisons. And so this is such a big day for me, and it's such an important interview for me. And I don't know why I keep crying. I've cried already twice, and here I am crying again. Here's his bio. Bessel van der Kolk is the founder and medical director of the Trauma Center in Brookline, Massachusetts. He's also a professor of psychiatry at Boston University Medical School. His books include Traumatic Stress, The Effects of Overwhelming Experience on the Mind, Body, and Society, and The Body Keeps the Score, Brain, Mind, and Body in the Healing of Trauma. Bessel van der Kolk, welcome to Compassion in Action. I have to tell you, your book changed my life. And I just wanted to thank you so much. I read it in 2018. I gave it to my sister. She gave it to her therapist. They hadn't even heard about trauma.
Right.
And you know, I don't know if you know that I'm working in prisons, and
That's why I took the assignment.
fantastic. And I just have to say, you're one of my heroes. The work you're doing, the way you've changed, the way we think about behavior and trauma it's landmark work. And I'm just so grateful for what you've done and what you're doing.
Thank you.
Yes. And I'd like to start off with, what is your definition of trauma?
So trauma is an experience that overwhelms your coping mechanisms. So it's different for different people, and that leave you horrified, bewildered, confounded, no way out, and collapsed, basically.
Yes. And trauma is not just from war or from natural causes or from natural disasters.
No, most traumas are a function of interpersonal trauma. Uh, most most traumas occur in families. For women, the most traumas are inflicted by the intimate partners. For kids, most traumas are inflicted by both parents. Moms are not exempted. And quite a few men also get traumatized by their female partners, of course. Um, and so it starts in the family, basically. And so this emphasis on, oh, it happens out there when people go to Afghanistan. Uh, I wish it was true. Huh? But trauma starts at home.
Yes. And you talk about secrets, and that how when we keep these secrets, um,
Yeah.
there's no way to process what happened to us.
Yeah, so when something happens, um, the immediate thing is not that you get permanently altered. You are completely befuddled, etc. And then the response of your environment becomes critical. So if somebody holds you and say, "Honey, I'll take care of you. I'll be there for you," like we do with little babies. Anybody who's ever had a baby knows how catastrophic babies react to their environments. And then you pick them up and you sing them and you rock them. And then before too long, it's no longer a catastrophe. That's true for humans to a large degree also. So the event is not the end. The response of the environment is huge. And again, in interpersonal family violence, again, it oftentimes cannot be talked about. So it's not real.
Right.
And so a very important part of resolving trauma is to be able to tell the truth.
Yes. And you talk about environments where of soothing. And when you're in a prison, there's no way to resolve these issues that are coming up. You're already traumatized, and then you can't even ask for help. The secrets are even more embedded in prisons. And
Well, of course, prisons are very complex situations because, you know, there may be prisoners who have not been traumatized, but it's not the ones I hear about or meet. Um, and so you come into this uh, without a sense of safety, a sense of security, a sense of self, oftentimes. And then you go into a prison, and of course, everything gets multiplied. And I'm oftentimes astonished that there are people who actually manage to get programs in prisons that actually make a difference. Like one of my favorite programs, very simple, is hula dancing in St. Quentin prison. I'm like, wow, that's so cool, you know. And the Shakespeare programs that a variety of people that I know do, where you can give a voice to yourself and become a member of a team, of a group, of a group of people who do stuff. And so I'm just really amazed what the creative programs there are in prison here and there. Probably pretty exceptional, but when you hear about it, you go like, wow, that's really fantastic.
I want to talk about those programs after down the line because it's about getting to the cortex. And so I want to talk a little bit about the technical issues or the technical neuroscience. So can you just tell us about the amygdala, the cortex, and you call them the smoke alarm and the
Right.
watchtower. So if you can,
Well, you know, even in neuroscience, it's all metaphors. So there's clusters of cells that we sort of call the amygdala, or other clusters of cells we call the epicortical gray. But it's really the brain is just billions of neurons that are connected with each other that form networks. Huh? And so it's really about how trauma changes your networks. It changes your network of fear. So that things that for other people go like, yeah, the guy was a little out of control. For you goes like, look, the guy did something, and you become very angry. Or somebody looks at you cross-eyed, and for the rest of the week you are feeling totally dejected and nobody loves me, even though it's relatively minor. So to a large degree, after having been traumatized, your brain automatically responds to things as if the old stuff is back. And you start behaving like it, and when you behave like people are attacking you, you're likely to attack people, and so you're likely to do terrible things to people. Huh? And I'm sure that the prison environment is a very reactive environment where there are probably not a lot of saints walking around like, "Hey, take it easy, man. I'll take care of you." And so everybody's reactive, and then the guards are reactive, and they probably have their own issues, and so you get this very reactive environment where everybody's trying to control everybody rather than helping people to regain the sense of themselves. But at the core of all this is that after having been traumatized, your brain gets rewired basically to deal with extreme situations. So um, let's say somebody has served 3 tours of in Afghanistan. They're very good at being in Afghanistan. They suck at being home in Los Angeles because their brain is wired to see danger everywhere, and they don't see the flowers blooming out here, and don't see the kids playing. That sort of becomes meaningless. And so your whole system gets rewired and reorganized to be to cope with danger, basically.
which is exactly how we're wired in prison.
Yeah.
It's
Well, the
this.
prison, of course, aggravates it. So people come into a prison, by and large, with very hyper-reactive central nervous systems, or the other side, which is shutting down, huh, and feeling nothing. Yeah.
And the two can be at the same time because, well, just so you know, I have an ACE score of 8. I've been very hypervigilant all my life, but I've also had tendencies to want to numb out
Right.
and just, you know,
Yeah, and I think the word want is not appropriate there. You automatically numb out. It's not
mm,
like, oh, let me make myself numb out. Something happens and you disappear. And sometimes you may welcome it. At other times you go like, I didn't want to disappear. But see, what's important to know, and it's really critical, is that these events occur in the back of your brain which is survival brain. That's the part of your brain that we have in common with all other mammals. And so your brain automatically reacts in fight and flight, or automatically reacts in freeze. And your cognitive self has very little control over that.
And that's the key here. To me, this is like the crux of when I realized that my road rage had nothing to do with who I was, that the way when my son would drop something in the kitchen and I'd scream, it's like,
Yeah.
and yell at him and just go ballistic. And I really was being really hard on myself, and the awareness, I'm just going to cry again, the awareness about that this is not who I am. This is a function of my brain trying to keep myself safe.
And the result is you feel ashamed about who you are. Huh? And so you do things that you don't really want to do and that make people angry or reject you. Say, hey, I don't want to hang out with her because every minor thing she blows up and gets insulted, offended, etc., etc. And so you feel more and more like a defective person. And the feeling of being defective becomes a very important part of who you are. So basically, you say, "I'm a piece of shit. I'm no good." Yeah,
Exactly,
yeah.
exactly. And when I read your book, that feeling lifted. It was like, oh, and and then a month later, I walked into a prison
Mm.
and I was looking around and I said, this isn't a prison. This is a trauma center. This is just everybody in here is traumatized and we got to do something about it. We can't leave them here. And just so you know, I've sent the book to maybe 15 men in prison. I sent your book.
I've seen many pictures of prisoners reading my books, which makes my day.
Yes. And, there's 1,833 prisons in the United States and then 110 federal prisons. And I want all of them to have your book. I want them all, and I want them to do book clubs on this. So
Good, good.
yes, because this is it. We're done. We're done with what we were doing. This is it. We're in a new paradigm now. And the paradigm says you're traumatized. Let's bring healing. But anyway, back to the smoke detector and the watchtower. So I love those metaphors. Um,
And so basically, the smoke detector sits in the back of your brain um, that is always active. So are you okay? So if you see something scary, you go into flight, pumps your heart up, makes you want to disappear or fight back. Or it says, man, you're done for, and you shut down and you play possum, as it were. So that's a primitive reaction. Now the question becomes, is how do you get there? Huh? And how do you get to that animal brain inside of you? And it turns out there's actually two ways of doing it. One is through holding, touching, and breathing, basically. So you go into the whole um, safety with people holding you, calming you down, kindergarten teacher type stuff. We all should be, if you become a trauma therapist, you have to become a kindergarten teacher because you're dealing with kindergarten type brains. Like you don't say to kids, don't get upset. No, kids get upset. And so you need to sort of arrange it that someone is an adult in the room who helps you to sort of calm down. And the other way is you can, there's a circuit in the brain which is called the midline structures, the cortex that run from just above your eyes in the middle of your brain to the back. And that's the part of your brain that's devoted to yourself. Huh? And that gets very damaged when you get traumatized, so you don't have much of a sense of who you really are and what you really want and what you really need. So it sets you up to not have a clear goal in life, and not very clearly being able to accomplish your sense of purpose, because that sense of self is oftentimes gets very damaged. Um, and so then, but once that part of you comes online, you can actually take care of that inner creature that you inhabit. Huh? And so, a friend of mine who died about 2 years ago did this wrote a book called the Dharma Brothers, and did a program on Vipassana meditation in the Alabama jails. It was stunning, teaching prisoners how to meditate. And these were not nice people, and they were not gentle people. I don't know how the hell they did it, but they got them to meditate for a whole week in a row in almost complete silence. And it had sensational results. Because the meditation activates that interoceptive pathway, that which I call the mohawk of the brain, basically. So, in order to become the master of your own ship, you need to get to know yourself and feel yourself and experience yourself and treat yourself almost like a kid. Like, hey, what's going on with you, boy? What are you feeling right now? What are you upset about? And to really and to feel your body and to feel what calms you down and to learn to breathe and to learn to take care of yourself the way you take care of a small kid.
Yeah, yeah, because most of the people in prison, from what I've seen, the men and women I've talked to, weren't parented. A lot of they'll lend in. I just spoke with Dr. Bruce Perry, and he talks about how when we start bringing trauma therapy to people, we actually take them back to the developmental places where they
Right.
hadn't received.
Yeah.
So being
Bruce
nurturing,
knows his stuff extremely well. Yeah.
yeah, being, being kind and compassionate to yourself is a way to start getting into your brain. I think you talked about it going from the bottom up or the top down. So meditation would be the top down.
Not
And
really top down. So really just noticing what goes on inside of you. Of course, it helps enormously to have a teacher.
yes,
Most of us aren't very good. Like even during COVID, like I'm a big fan of yoga. My research has shown that yoga is an incredibly effective treatment of trauma, better than any psychiatric drug, by the way. huh? But during COVID, I don't practice yoga all the time because there's not enough support. And so, we're very social creatures and we can help each other. And when you have a when you're in prison or anywhere else, and you have people say, "Okay, Monday from 8 to 9 we do yoga, and we do it again 2 days from now," and you sort of have other people do it. That makes it much easier.
you bring up COVID, and that's something I want to just touch upon because I think it's a threat, and it is a place, especially in prison. It's an invisible threat,
Yeah.
and I talked to a former vet, and he said he's was panicked cleaning his house and just really bouncing off the walls, feeling out of control. And so what is that? What happens when it's an invisible threat? What happens to the brain
Well,
and the
again, it depends very much on who you are. You know, people ask me about COVID all the time. I say, "What do you think about the trauma of COVID?" I said, "Actually, it's a trauma for some people, not for other people." For me, as a guy who has been around for a while, who is financially pretty secure, who has a loving marriage, it is an inconvenience.
right?
I missed hanging out with my friends. I missed hugging people a lot. But missing people is not a trauma. Huh? It's sad that we couldn't hang out, but when it triggers you and it reminds you of napalm in Vietnam or something about the world being dangerous and you're uptight all the time, then not only does it become threatening to you, but it becomes threatening who you for the people you're with. Because one of the things that's been hard with COVID is that we need to put up with each other's idiosyncrasies when you live with somebody, and hopefully you're still enough when somebody leaves the dirty dishes in the sink or whatever. You go like, "Honey, you forgot to do your dishes," rather than threatening them and blowing up. But the trauma response is to threaten to blow up. And so we know that there has been an incredible increase in domestic violence because so many people don't know how to regulate their physiology.
Yeah.
Uh,
And so that's it's so great. You just talk about everything I have on my list. um, well, I just want to bring this quote up before we, but I want to talk about regulation because that's
Yeah.
so key to all of your work and everything I learned. I'm learning how to regulate because of this. You say, being traumatized means continuing to organize your life as if the trauma were still going on, unchanged and unmutable, as every encounter or event is contaminated by the past.
That's
So,
right.
yeah. And so being in prison and having COVID right there, it's just another trigger.
Yeah. No, you really choose the toughest environment. It's, to make a prison into a healing place. Boy, that's quite a challenge, huh? Where people can feel safe. For example, it's a simple thing that helps people feel safe. Singing together. I don't know how much singing together is in prisons. I don't know. Um, but as a kid, I have memories of singing everywhere. In school, in camps, youth groups, whatever. Kids don't sing that much anymore because the iPhone brings it to us and we don't have to do it anymore. And so we have cut off one way of really calming ourselves down and being in sync with each other. But making music together, dancing together, singing together, uh, playing sports together. All these things bring our bodies in sync with the bodies around us. And when our body is in sync with other people, we feel a sense of pleasure. The sense of pleasure that we experience is the result of being in sync. So one of the things that was left out of all the textbooks is that trauma leads to a loss of pleasure. Huh? And because it makes other people so scary, so you don't feel a sense of pleasure. It's hard, it's not never, but it makes it harder to feel that sense of being in sync with each other. So what I have been really pushing and emphasizing in school systems and other systems, we need to do more moving together, singing together, being in sync with each other, which is when you travel around the world to India, Indochina, Africa, people deal with trauma by synchronous activities. Our culture is so disembodied that we deal with trauma by taking pills and drinking alcohol.
Yeah, you mentioned Desmond Tutu would stop the reconciliation trials and have
Yeah,
people start moving and dancing and singing.
absolutely.
And I thought that
Yeah,
was incredible. And you
yeah,
also talked about marching bands.
yeah,
And I also thought about in the military, just having that rhythm with people.
exactly.
Um, they
Yeah.
do these exercises in marching because they're in sync. So
You know, when you look at it, it's really amazing that basic training in the military, that kids who join the military are not the most regulated, goal-oriented, well put together people. Many people join the military in order to escape horrible situations. But what do you do with those people? And the military, since Roman times, have understood how do you help people to calm down and to become good soldiers by moving together, singing together, marching together. It's all about synchrony. Huh? And I'm actually pushing very hard wherever I go to create more activities having to do with being in sync with other people.
yes. So when I would go into prisons, we'd sit in a circle. We would do these things called crazy eights, and we'd do these do these little exercises, and it brought joy to the room,
Mhm.
and it also brought us in sync. We suddenly we'd sit down, and we all felt connected all of a
Yeah,
sudden.
yeah,
But it's in those circles that I find was the most powerful work we did.
yeah. And the more stupid it is, the better.
Yes. Yeah.
Just stupid stuff, just throw a cloth ball at each other, uh, nothing cognitive, nothing like, oh, you will feel so much better if you throw a cloth ball at somebody. We're dealing with a different part of the brain that needs to feel that sense of rhythm and synchronicity, which is natural for mammals, which is how
So
we are.
so those exercises are helping us regulate in our
Yeah.
brainstem and our amygdala.
Yeah.
And so
Like,
then,
I think we need to get away from the word amygdala. It's too defined. It's, like you say, I think survival brain is a better term.
okay, let's
Yeah.
do that. Yeah, I've been focused on the amygdala because that's what I learned, but survival brain. So when
Yeah.
the survival brain feels in sync and connected, then you can ascend to the cortex, right?
Yeah. Right.
And I'm going to read this quote because this one, and in the cortex is where the imagination is, right?
Yeah. That's true.
So you say, imagination is absolutely critical to the quality of our lives. Our imagination enables us to leave our routine everyday existence by fantasizing about travel, food, sex, falling in love, or having the last word. All things that make life interesting. Imagination gives us the opportunity to envision new possibilities. It is an essential launch pad for making our hopes come true. It fires our creativity, relieves our boredom, alleviates our pain, enhances our pleasure, and enriches our most intimate relationships.
Sometimes people read something from my book and they go, "That is good. I wish I had written that." And I go, "Oh, actually, I did write that. That's
Yes,
good."
you did. Yes, your book is just it's jam packed. And so about this thing about imagination, because when you're in your survival brain, you can't access the imagination.
Right. Right. Huh? And that's what you see. It's sort of at the core of trauma is that survival brain takes over, so everything becomes a threat. And so if you start to be nice to me and say, "Oh, let's think about walking through the woods and just the trees go," I can't do it because my core being thinks, "Oh, she's about to do something terrible to me." So I cannot free up my mind to think about other things. Huh? So you wouldn't know in LA, for example, but I live in a very cold part of the country. And the way you make it through the winter is, I'm already thinking about the winter, even though it's beautiful right now. Like, oh, shoveling snow. I say, oh, maybe I'll save some money to go to Puerto Rico. And then in my imagination, I already feel my toes in the sand, and I already smell the smell of these tropical flowers. I go, okay, I better save that money and start making a reservation to fly to the tropical area. And that makes the winter livable. But when you're
Yes,
trapped, it's all there is.
right. And in families that are impoverished, extreme poverty,
Yeah,
they're in their survival brain all the time.
yeah,
And the imagination is how you can get yourself out of situations.
right.
But if there's no, yeah, and
It's huge. It's huge. No, I'm so continuously impressed with that. I work in school sometimes. I live in a nice part of Boston. I was able to send my kids to a nice school, and they did theater and music and sports and all kind of stuff that gives me a sense of pleasure and joy. I never had to tell my kids to study because kids like to study if they feel good about themselves. But if everything sucks, you're not going to do that. And so what we need to do, and I was really impressed, I'm still very impressed with it right now, is that the inequality in different school systems really um, make it much more likely to very poor people to never be able to find a way out.
right, because, and you were talking about budget cuts,
Yeah,
and what a crime that is to the art programs and to the
yeah,
theater, all the theater music programs, because those are the things that allow that child to thrive and
right,
get
right,
out of the survival brain. And you also talk about the inability to learn when you're in your survival brain.
yeah,
You said when hyper aroused or shut down, we cannot learn from the experience.
right. And that we see over again, and as we can see with your poor people in jail, uh, they don't learn from experience. And they are in jail, and the juvenile justice says, "Well, we'll teach them." But you don't teach them anything because nothing can come in.
Right.
And when something dangerous happens, say, "Oh, that feels familiar. People have screwed with me before. I know how to deal with people who disrespect me. I'll punch them out." And and so nothing can be learned if that brain hasn't been calm enough to say, "Hmm, it feels actually much better to go to somebody. Oh, it looks like you're having a tough day."
Yeah, yeah, and because
Yeah,
all the information that comes in is first through the survival brain,
exactly, exactly. Yeah,
and then it's like nanoseconds you talk about. It'll get to the cortex, but it has to pass through the
right.
filter.
And by the time you get to your cortex, you're already engaged in your uncontrolled behavior, and you push the rational. Yeah, I know, I shouldn't be hitting her, but yeah,
I had that with my sister. Um, you know, she's younger than me, and she can criticize me, and I am off. I'm that person I don't want to be. And it's just so sad because we harm people before we even know what we've done, and we kind of know we're doing it, but
but the thing, you can learn. You know, my younger brother occasionally says things like, "Go like, wow, that's pretty nasty," but it's like it's pretty nasty. Like it's like, um, and so if you meditate and if you do yoga and if you do or tai chi or hula dancing or any of those things, you probably are able to put up with your sister and go like, yeah, it's too bad my sister is so tactless or still so angry or something. But it's not about me; it's about her, you know. And so you really shift the perspective uh, once you really do the work. Yeah,
yes, I've been doing the work since I read your book, and
yeah,
it's still a process. And I do meditate, and I take walks, and I dance. I dance when no one's watching, and
sure.
and I want to bring all of that to the people in prison and to my sister, all of that, so, because I really think once they have the tools, once the people in prison have the tools, including the officers, including the staff,
Yeah, absolutely.
the level of threat will go down.
So how are you doing? Are you able to reach the staff also?
Well, we have a curriculum. It's a trauma-informed curriculum that we created for them,
Uh,
and we're also starting a video series called Trauma Talks, which I'm going to include this interview in the Trauma Talks so they can watch this interview and see you in action talking about the book that changed my life.
oh, good, good.
Yeah, so that this information and repeating it so that they get the brainstem
Right.
cortex piece,
Yeah.
so that it's like, okay, wait, now I'm in my brainstem, and I'm not, you can't speak
Yeah.
sometimes when you're in fight
No,
or flight.
but no, the very first neuroscience research we did, have we put people in a scanner and have them relive their trauma, and the whole speech center of the brain disappears. So you become like a blubbering idiot. So when you get really upset, you sound like a crazy person because you can't get it out. Except Wernicke's area, which is the other speech center of the brain, which helps you to say fucking shit, stays online.
What center is that? What part of the brain is that?
So you have two speech centers in the brain. One of them is Broca's area that allows us to have a pretty rational and pleasant conversation. And there's Wernicke's area, which is sort of emotional language. So you can still swear and cry for your mom, but you can't put things into time and context. So you can still expel nasty and angry words, but you cannot communicate anymore.
Literally you cannot communicate because both sides, like we said before, you can't learn, but you also, nobody's hearing each other.
No, you cannot communicate. So you cannot really say, "Hey, when you said that, it really bugged me, and let's talk about how we can talk to each other." No, no, that's not possible.
Wow. But see, and that's what gets frustrating. The people, like the officers, they get frustrated because they've said this to this person 30 times, or the parole board, they've said this to the guy 30 times. But if you're not here,
Right.
Not coming in. And that's the thing. It's like right there in that nugget that could
Yeah.
change the whole prison system once we realize.
Well, we also need to really learn how you can change it. For example, at the end of my book, I talk about neurofeedback, how you can learn to play computer games with your own brainwaves and calm your own brain down. I would be pretty surprised if you told me that you're doing neurofeedback in the presence where you work. I've never heard about that. So we're trying to, where I live right now, we're trying to move towards getting neurofeedback in the school systems. So that when kids come to school on Monday morning, they have seen horrible things that people have been beating them. So they're out of control, labeled with these stupid diagnoses like oppositional defiant disorder or conduct disorder, which are completely meaningless diagnoses. And then these kids are too upset. You get, hey, why don't we do some neurofeedback? Calm your brain down. And then they're not a pin in the neck in the class and they can actually learn. And so what's really disturbing to me is the degree to which um, there is really very little funding to study effective interventions. And I've sort of been a little crazy, really always hustling for it and trying it. But there are more interventions that work than what people are aware of.
And how does the neurofeedback work? How does that work? What is the child looking at when they're
Oh,
there?
you're looking at their own brain. So you put electrodes on people's skull, you harvest the brain waves underneath it. When you look at these brain waves and you know what you're seeing, I go like, wow, it's amazing that this kid is able to do anything at all because they usually see these very disturbed brains. And you go like, okay, so we need to make more of those waves so the kid can become calmer and learn. So you put him in front of the computer and the computer gathers their brainwaves, and whenever the kid makes the right brainwaves that will help him to focus and be calm and concentrate, uh, a spaceship moves, or he hears some nice music playing, or he gets some of the water in your brain, and whenever uh, he doesn't make any of these waves that help him, the stimulus disappears. And yeah, you probably guess, hey, come on, I don't want to look at a blank screen. And so you sort of get sort of pushed to make the right brainwaves, so automatically. And then before too long, you start feeling calmer. And so we can train the brain.
Train the
To
brain.
my mind, aside from psychedelics, which is very hot also, um, uh, the brain-computer interface stuff is really the big thing of the future, and that we can really wire our brains in ways that are helpful to us. Yeah.
Wow. I think we should do a study in prison. I think I would like to talk to you about that.
Well, it's a big question of that'd be great actually,
Yes.
but doing a study is a complex thing. It costs a study, I'd say at least $1 million before you do a study. I mean, this is hard, not an easy thing to do.
Anything's easy if you decide it's easy.
Well, if it's easy for you to get $1 million together and a research team, like, these are complex things to do, but you should.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Now that I have your okay, I'm gonna go see what we can do about that because I feel like people in prison are returning to us.
Yeah,
And 95% of the people in prison are returning home.
absolutely.
And if they're in
Absolutely.
great shape,
Yeah.
guess what's going to happen to their communities? Those
That's it.
communities are going to benefit from their arrival.
And so the other thing is that nobody will want to do anything because people are spending so much money on ineffective programs that you need to do the research. And
Yes.
you're saying, I want to do a study. I go like, go for it. You're in a community with a lot of very smart people out there in Los Angeles and a lot of money people. So you should be able to do it. And once you treat 100 prisoners, and the ones who got neurofeedback are don't go back and aren't violent anymore, and are able to get a job, and the ones who didn't do neurofeedback are in the same treadmill. You can take that to the Department of Education or to the Department of Corrections, etc., and say, look, it works. But
Right.
you need to prove it.
Well, and how long does it take in from what you've gathered for the brain to start getting trained?
Oh, we usually see result like we did a study with extremely disrupted kids, and I didn't have enough money to do it long enough, but after 20 sessions of neurofeedback, we saw a clear difference in their ability to concentrate, get along with other people, sleep better, eat better, and be more themselves. But clearly 20 sessions weren't enough.
Right.
When I talk about the importance of money, is that, that's all the money that we had. And so these kids, so you saw them beginning to move, and then I said, sorry, we're out of money. So,
Ah,
so the issue of really doing it well and doing the study well is very, very important.
absolutely. Well, maybe we can get you
But
some more
I
money
hope you
too.
do it. I hope you do it. Yeah,
Oh yeah, I'm just starting. We're just starting
yeah,
because we have 2.2 million people that are traumatized. To me, if you've committed a crime,
I know.
that's a trauma. That's
And
a
their kids, and their kids.
yes,
America is the most traumatized Western country in the world.
yes, yes. And it's I don't know if you've heard of Thomas Hubel and the work he's done with generational trauma.
I've heard his name. I don't know him yet.
Yeah, he talks about generational trauma. He works with
Oh,
a
yeah.
lot of the Holocaust survivors and
Right. Well, it's interesting that I got a call about 20 years ago from an organization that says, are you interested in studying intergenerational trauma? And I said, absolutely. And they said, let's study the effects of slavery. And they said, no, no, we want to study the effect of the Holocaust. But I said, a lot of people studying the effect of the Holocaust, which is indeed important, but it only was a very small segment of our population. The huge unspoken trauma, of course, is the legacy of slavery, which indeed has taken place from generation to generation. And it took till 2021 for people to begin to talk about it. The Civil War ended in 1865. Like, it's just like stunning.
it's stunning, but it's the secrecy and it's the shame, I think, that keeps all of this in place because people don't want to face their past. They'd rather, oh,
Yeah.
here's another one. Here's another great quote from you. Victims are a member of society whose problems represent the memory of suffering, rage, and pain in a world that longs to forget.
Again, I wish I'd written that. That's very good.
Your writing is exquisite. Absolutely. I could read your book over and over and over again. Um, I mean, nobody wants to face it. Nobody wants to face what they've done, what their ancestors have done. But I know my ancestors. My mother was raised on a sharecropping farm in Louisiana. I know that's a legacy of slavery right there. But it's
Right.
also a legacy of poverty because when the slaves stopped working, guess who got poor?
Right.
And that's the resentment of the South. The South doesn't want to, they're resentful because they lost their abundance.
Economic base, that's right. No, I came to Atlanta for the first time, I think in 1965. So I was still a young guy. And it was not a well place. And I thought, it looks like Sherman just came through Atlanta. And that's only 1965. So the legacy of the Civil War was alive and well when I first went to the South, actually. Yeah.
Yes, and what happens is it keeps everyone is traumatized. We're talking not just the African Americans, we're also
Yeah.
talking about the
Yeah.
slave owners and the communities. And
Yeah.
so everyone's in their brainstorm stem, nobody's in their imagination. Nobody's moving on and creating a new world.
Yeah.
And
That's what we need. That's what we need.
that's the key here.
At the end, you know, the neuroscience is terribly important. The treatment piece is terribly important, but the final common pathway is politics.
Mm,
If you don't get the support for it and the social structure for it and the money for it, nothing will change.
absolutely. I
Right.
agree. One thing I want to talk about is you say, I don't know, I might have been an interview I heard that your normal functions are when you're traumatized don't really work either. Like they get shut down, like sleep and digestion. And
Yeah.
can you speak to that? Because I know in prison people aren't getting enough sleep. Um, and I know they're not getting enough food, the best food. So all of these, yeah, yeah. So all of these things, it's really important to get enough sleep. I mean,
Yeah, but it's easier said than done, huh? Uh, you know, again, there's little brain machines that can help the brain to fall asleep, but I bet you don't see them in prison. Um, that indeed. So when we're talking about the survival brain, we're talking about the housekeeping of the body. I see we're talking about the most elementary bodily functions. So appetite gets disturbed, sleep gets disturbed, digestive functions get disturbed, sexual functions get disturbed, breathing gets disturbed. Uh, uh, when you have been traumatized, uh, you're 15 times more likely to suffer from any of the 10 leading causes of death. You know, so this stuff doesn't just go to your forebrain, it is the whole body. The stress hormones keep getting secreted, the immunological system is messed up, so you live much shorter and you become much more ill. So it's really it's a gigantic public health issue, and maybe the reason why the American health system is so much more expensive than any other country um, is in part because we have such a gigantic traumatized population.
wow. Yeah, that's what you said. Trauma is now our most urgent public health issue.
I got that from the Centers for Disease Control. I didn't calculate it. The CDC calculated that.
Yeah, well,
Right.
great news though. Everyone seems to be awake. This month is Mental Health Awareness Month. You know, it's
Uh-huh.
May. And so Oprah has that new book with Dr. Perry, and
Right.
she has a new uh, television series coming out.
Yep.
Nadine Burke Harris has the ACE Awareness My Number Story
Yeah.
campaign.
Yeah.
So, you know, the groundbreaking work that you started,
No, no, no.
and you
I shouldn't get a credit for it. Like Bruce Perry is about my age. He was doing the work. We've always admired each other's works. There's so many people who do it.
yeah, Stephen Porges. I know, I understand.
Yeah.
There's no, and not just you, but you're part of that. You're part
Yeah.
of the star team.
Yeah. Well, I was at the right time at the right place, but it really is. So consciousness is bubbling up all over, huh? And I have the sense that there is more of it today than there was 3 years ago. But we'll see.
Yes, well, I'm not going to stop talking about it until
Right.
we work
Right.
with the people in prison correctly, and then
If you can change the prison system, that is how it bears fruit. Huh?
yes,
I mean, that's the
yes,
fruit. Uh, I'm just planting the seeds, but if you really are able to change the the juvenile justice and the corrections institution, that's where it pays off.
and why do you think so? Because I think so,
What do you
but
think? Because it's a public health issue. It's just too damn expensive to have 2.5 million people languishing in jails. Like, what a waste of human lives to have 2.5 million children in America whose parents are in jail. What a waste of human life. You know, all these people who are too traumatized, too ill to work. What a waste of life. You know,
exactly, exactly. And a waste of joy and a waste of, you
yeah.
know, like just human community. That's one of the big things of healing. I love that silly segue I just did.
Um,
um,
we all need to congratulate ourselves from time to time. It's very good.
but you say the community. You quote Ubuntu. You say my humanity is inextricably bound up in yours,
Yeah,
and
that's Nelson Mandela and Bishop Tutu. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But so I have never worked in prisons. I've visited prisons sometimes, but I don't know them in any way. But I bet that even in prison, you see little communities,
yes,
huh? And people who have each other's back, usually around stupid stuff like racial differences or whatever, tattoos, or but our natural proclivity as human beings is to form communities, and I bet you even see that in jail, and and reciprocal relationships, and that's really where you get your sense of safety, is knowing you have each other's back. And so that also becomes the important thing of promoting that and creating that in every system we work in. Yeah.
Yes, but so there's tribal, it's a tribal, forming gangs is like a tribal instinct.
Right. Completely understandable.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And yet there are other people in the world, right? So the idea is that we have to include other people. Otherwise, we have, our own tribal instincts are not working. Our racism, our white supremacy
Yeah.
is not working. So that the inclusion is part of the community that I'm envisioning in prison, is that
Right.
people recognize each other's differences, but also our similarities, which in this case, it's trauma.
Well, not only trauma. We all want to have healthy kids. We all want to be good at something. We all want to be competent at something. You know, we like to cook. We like to make music. We like to build furniture. And so, a very important part of having self-esteem is to know that you're good at something.
Yes.
And so we can certainly do a lot in prison and school systems to help people to feel like I am good at this.
Yes.
I don't see that happening a lot, but we should have much more of it. Yeah.
Well, what we're doing, one of the programs we're doing at Compassion Prison Project is we're having people contribute to our books, that book anthologies written by prison people, so that they see their work in a book, that their
Good.
poetry, their artwork is
Yeah.
valuable and
Good.
publishable.
Good. Good. Yeah.
And one of the
Yeah.
things
We all need to be seen. That's part of being a human being. And as if you write a beautiful poem, to say, would you like to read it to the group? And the people go, wow, that's amazing. You wrote that. We need that. You know.
Yes,
Yeah.
we all need that. We all desperately need to be seen. I mean, that was one of my problems as a child, is that my mother was my sister was allergic to milk, so I never got any attention once she
Right.
came along. And so I've been trying to get seen all my life. And everyone in prison, and they'll do things to get seen that can be dangerous,
Oh
or
yeah. Yeah.
so we want to move from
Yeah. We
here.
have a deep biological need to be known and to be seen.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, there was a book came out of Argentina. Jacobo Timmerman said, "Ce- "Cell without a number, prisoner without a name."
Mm.
I mean, just to recite the title of that book just brings tears to my eyes. Huh? To be completely irrelevant, to
Absolutely.
have to be erased as a person. It's terrible. Yeah.
And ironically, that's what trauma does anyway, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It erases our ability to be human, because I mean, while we're in the fight or flight state, this is our human center, right up
Right.
here. So yes, what a haunting title. Um, one of you, so you say the challenge to recovery is to reestablish the ownership of the body and the mind of the self.
Yeah.
And so can you talk about regulation and how we can like do little simple exercises? I know you talk about moving and meditation, but is there little steps people can start taking just in this?
Yeah. You so I'm very friendly with what I think is quite a large group of yoga in prison. You may have heard them. Um, exactly. Going to prison, doing yoga every day with other people, encouraging each other to do it, fantastic. The hula program I talked about. I lived in Hawaii for a long time and I consider myself part Hawaiian. I dance a mighty good hula myself, actually. People don't know that about me, but I think doing the hula together, I mean, it's a wonderful experience. To just move together, to just sing together. And so I think programs where you can really have fun together, to explore your physicality together. volleyball, basketball. They're all ways of just getting yourself in rhythm and in tune with other people. And then my favorite program probably is the Shakespeare in Prison program. Uh, Gorgeous. To learn to inhabit a character who isn't you, but to be a king and to speak the words of a king and to be a beggar and speak the words of a beggar. Say, oh, that's what a beggar says. That's what a king says. And that's what so and so says. Oh, that's what it feels like to really learn to inhabit somebody other than that miserable person who you consider yourself to be and say, like, I can actually stand up and feel like a king. Huh?
Yes, you talk about, sorry about that noise,
Yeah.
but you talk about, it's called Sentence to Shakespeare, right? That's the juvenile.
Well, there's a number of number of the program that I know best is called Shakespeare in the Courts here in the Berkshire County. Yeah.
Yes. And one of the things I want to do is have Hamilton go to one of the prisons and have them perform Hamilton for,
Not for the prisoners. I know a number of programs where people perform things for prisoners, and nothing wrong with that. No,
but for the
they
public.
need to perform it. They
Yes.
need to be helped to say those lines and to feel those lines in their bodies.
Yes.
Don't be a spectator. Be a participant.
Ah,
Do it. Have the courage to get up there and say these difficult lines and go like, I can say these lines.
yes. Because and that's putting you right here.
Well, it's putting it all the way through.
Ah,
When you're Richard III or Richard II or Othello or whatever, you become Othello. You become these people. I say, I am, and you stand like this person. That is what it feels like. Yeah. Very profound.
so here's a question. A lot of the men that I work with are in maximum security prisons. They're
Yeah.
locked down 23 hours a day. It's
Yeah.
not solitary, but it's close to it. So what can we do in there? Like they can't recite Shakespeare, or we could get them a book, but what could we do in that situation? They have a cellie, so they can be with their, they have one person. I guess they could hula together, but
Well, I'm really the wrong person to ask this. I can speculate and say things, but it's likely that people who know about prisons will go, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. So I think you want to talk to Kurt Tofteland, for
okay,
example, who runs the Shakespeare in Prison program. But
okay.
really talk to people who have worked in prisons, which I've never done. So I'd be sort of overstep my bounds if I would start giving concrete advice how to do that. Yeah.
Okay, I understand. I just want people to be in their cortex for some of the day every day, so they can start
Right.
getting
Right.
getting.
And I'm sure it can be done. But I wouldn't go to me as the first person. I'd go to people who actually have done it, who have experimented with it, and to say that didn't work and that seemed to work okay. Uh, you know, and I happen to hear fairly regularly about programs at St. Quentin.
Mm,
And since you're a Californian, I'd hook up with these folks in St. Quentin and say, what are you learning? What's working for you? You know?
absolutely. I mean, of course, I'm in the network, so we're
Yeah,
we're all talking, and
yeah, yeah.
one of the great healing things is the restorative justice programs, where they may not talk directly to their victim, but they meet with other victims so that they understand the real impact of what happened,
Wow.
like kind of a vicarious victim. And
Yeah, but they also need to see. I think that's important. But they have been so hurt themselves,
yes,
and I think it's important to. There was a program in San Francisco called Man Alive, run by a guy named Seamus. I forgot his last name. It was a fantastic program, and like so many of these programs, it was abolished just as it was being very successful. You know, the the forces to that are not on your side are really formidable. But if you look up Mind Alive, my friend Jim Gilligan was very involved in it. It was a great program where people also need to deal with their own trauma.
Yes.
And I think it may be hard to really have compassion for somebody else until you have compassion for yourself. And as long as you don't dare to know how hurt you were by what happened to you, and and forgive yourself for having been so hurt, it becomes hard to actually, maybe hard to focus on other people.
I absolutely agree. Because most of the people in prison were victims first, and that's the piece people forget. It's that, and then it's like, what do you expect? Of course they're going to do this if you're
And it may give them even a sense of entitlement. Look what they did to me, I'm allowed to do it to you.
true. Well, yes, that's yes,
Right.
exactly. Well, it's learned behavior as well, right?
Yeah.
Um,
But but you know, this is very, it's hard and very serious work. You know, and we're dealing with people who have long habits of that have not helped them very much. So to teach people new habits is a lot of work. But with prisoners costing $48,000 per year per person, there's plenty of money out there that could be rerouted probably in that direction.
Absolutely. I want to tell you one of the things we did, one of the exercises we did, I printed out your epilogue um, that was called Choices to Be Made.
Right.
And in the circle of 35 men, each one got a copy and we read it aloud, the whole thing.
Wow, that's great.
Because and you talk about it's like it's your gift to us about what's possible that we need to get
Yeah,
into the schools. It's really to me it's your manifesto. It's like this is what needs to happen,
yeah,
your call to action.
yeah,
So after we read that, the men, I could see the tears in their eyes and they're just like, why didn't they see us? Why didn't they help us?
yeah,
And so I just wanted to thank you for that beautiful epilogue, which I highly recommend people read again,
yeah.
just to understand what we can do, who we can be as a society. And we can empty these prisons if we just take care of each other.
Well, again, it's interesting because it's so much dependent on politics. Uh, I've gotten a lot of blowback about an epicenter. Say, your book is great until you get to the epilogue and you're just a communist. Wow. And my response is no, actually, I'm an Eisenhower Republican, like the good old Republicans. Uh,
Yeah, well, but so if you're a Republican speaking, a good old Republican speaking these ideas, then they're just human ideas. I mean, that's the thing. They say socialism is, it's going to destroy our society. I
and
think
socialism doing pretty well in Sweden, Denmark, Holland, Germany. Like, it's doing pretty well there. It's not socialism; it's called social democracy, and it's just a when you say that, it's a sign that you're stupid. You don't know what you're talking about. Huh? Go live in one of the social democracies sometimes, see how it works. And the incarceration rate, for example, in the Netherlands, where I grew up, which has become quite a nice country after I left, is now 58 per 100,000. In the US, it's 950 per 100,000. So you want to continue the way you're doing, stay the course, and you'll continue to waste billions and billions of dollars on things to incarcerate people and to destroy lives. If you want to learn something, just do away with these stupid terms that don't mean anything until you know something, and learn where there's other societies that work, right?
absolutely. We don't
Yeah.
have to reinvent the wheel. It's
Well, you do, but
well here,
but,
but
but
we
to say
have
this is socialism, it brands you as a retard.
well,
It's,
yes, I
yeah,
would say socialism means humanism. It's just
you know, we are in this together, you know, and if we're not in this together, you'll pay your money for getting a gated community and to getting a gun and getting more police and getting more prisons. That's you can do that by not facing reality, like but is that what you want to do? Is that where you want to spend your money? Like,
No, and I don't want to spend our energy on keeping people locked up when we could spend our energy in healing them and bringing them home. I'm gonna give you one more quote that I
yeah,
loved. Yes, we're right there.
yeah, I need to go. Yeah,
Yeah, we're
yeah.
right at the time. Um, our capacity to destroy one another is matched by our capacity to heal one another. Restoring relationships and community is central to restoring well-being. And I just
That's
want to
that's it. Good luck with you and your work.
thank you,
All the
Bessel
best.
van der Kolk. It's been
Okay.
an honor to be with you, and I thank you for changing my life and by extension, maybe the lives of 2.2 million people.
Well, hopefully. Okay. Be very good. Thank you. Nice talking to you.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Bye.
Okay. Thank you, Bessel van der Kolk, for your wisdom and your authority on trauma and how it affects the brain, body, and spirit. It was such an honor to speak with you and to understand even more about what happens to the brain and the spirit when it's traumatized. Please visit our website, compassionprisonproject.org. Watch and share the short film, Step Inside the Circle. And if you are moved, please donate. Thank you.